back. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the podcast, Come Over for Dinner. Today I have a very special guest. Rachel is joining me, and she has a podcast of her own. Some of my listeners are familiar with the podcast, What Have You? She and her sister Becca have done it for, I don't know how many years. It's multiple, lots of episodes.
Probably 5,
maybe 5 years. It's very fun. So jump over and listen to that if you don't.
Oh my word!
And
yes, I'm trying to silence it, and instead I pinged my phone. I was like, I need to stop getting notifications.
She's getting notifications of
I'm very tech savvy. That's why I'm here on Bess's podcast.
Well, we are recording on a Saturday, and speaking of, she hosts a Sabbath dinner every Saturday evening. I guess. Do you have a particular time? Maybe around 6 o'clock.
Yeah, it's usually 6. Although I wouldn't say everyone, but we're just coming out of the phase where I was morning sick, so I feel like I have not been batting 1,000. But before that, we were doing most Saturdays.
She's probably still batting 1,000. She does. She hosts a Sabbath dinner every week for her family and friends, and I would say 60 people at least.
60 is pretty big. 45 is sort of our baseline,
your baseline,
somewhere around there, and then 60. We've done that for sure, but that's starting
that's your larger end.
Yes, that is more like, wait, pay more attention. Make sure there's enough food and enough stuff. So, yeah.
Well, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
Could you share one of your favorite menus that you serve, maybe for one of your Sabbath dinners?
This is actually a harder question. Like, I really found myself, I think it's because this is not answering your question directly, but I was thinking about this. I think that surprise is always an important part of hospitality. And I mean, sometimes the thing that is really fun is something that's much more casual than people expected. You know, like where like the mac and cheese and something like, and it's really fun. Mm-hmm. But other times when you feel like we've been straggling along just getting it done, it's really fun when you pull out all the stops and the table's much prettier and there's a lot more like So I would say my favorite, it's like the seasons, that my favorite is always the next one, like the thing that we're going to do next. We get up on a Saturday and say, what do we feel like having to do, you know, like what do we want to make today?
So you plan it in the morning of.
Oh yeah. I mean, every once in a blue moon. Well, I guess sometimes I buy things in advance thinking maybe we'll use this, but usually that's something in the freezer. It's not usually something that has a ticking emergency. Like, it's not like I have to use this right now.
Your fresh items you're shopping for in the morning and kind of collecting all the things you
My
need.
goal is to do the shopping before 2 o'clock. That is when, if we are at the store at 2, we feel like probably we're pushing our luck.
I'm feeling a slight panic attack.
Yeah, you're like, what is happening? Why are you doing this?
And you said 45 people, what?
Yeah, well.
How?
Yeah, I think it's just... I'm not recommending that. I'm not recommending that you go to the store in the afternoon, but we've done that.
That you have experience that you know, when you have that many meals under your belt, then you probably are a lot more, I guess, just experienced at it than some of the rest of us.
But the days when we're late like that is never our best work because nothing sounded good. It's like, why are we taking so long to get around to this? Because we couldn't decide what we felt like doing, and nothing really sounds awesome to us. And season changes, because we live in a place with pretty significant season changes. Mm-hmm. You hit those moments where you're like, what do we even eat in this? Like, what is the
boiling hot during the day, and then it gets cool at night.
What is the right thing to be doing right now? Yeah.
Do we have a soup? It's too hot for soup, but wait, now it's 50 at night. A cold front.
It's complicated. And with a big crowd, things like soup are more complicated too, because you're like, do we have soup bowls? Mm-hmm. Do we actually have like oh shoot?
That's true. So collecting what you need to serve that many people, if you're not doing paper or disposable, then you would have to pre-think, do I have 45 bowls?
Right.
Do you shop at Restaurant Supplies have you shopped at Restaurant Supplies over the years?
I have,
just collect
from time to time. No, plates I have are not from Restaurant Supply stuff. I have big mugs that I guess are probably like coffee mugs that I bought at like the Wazoo surplus sale, but they were some kind of restaurant ware thing that I would use if I was doing soup. I would use those probably because I have boxes of them in the basement.
Right.
But yeah, No, so I would say I always like something that I feel like we haven't had lately. So when I say this is funny because I think probably one of the menus that we make that most people are excited about, like when everyone comes, they're like, oh, good, we're doing this again, is essentially a big Mexican buffet. I mean, it's just a lot of Mexican assortment food, but we just did that recently, so it doesn't sound to me like the thing that I would want to do. I'm like, I don't feed people that. I fed them that last time. That's
I'm sure your guests would love it anytime because
probably
Mexican once a week doesn't sound bad to me.
It's probably the most flexible. It's a really good menu for a crowd because of, well, there's a lot of reasons that I recommend it, but one of them is allergies. It's way easier for people to accommodate their own. It's just much easier for guests to pick and choose what actually works for them.
Because they're creating their own bowl, so to speak.
Yeah. So, and with a big crowd, there's a likelihood that there is at least a dietary issue that you would like to accommodate. And I don't mean, we don't usually ask people. I try to just have enough side dishes that we don't have to talk about if they're allergic to something or if they can't tolerate something. Because with a lot of people, you could get really... Mm-hmm. It could become impossible.
A list.
Yeah. Mexican buffet I usually make... Now I think usually when we do this, it's typically some kind of enchiladas. I make a quick and easy enchilada version of something. And that's sort of the base. But I'll do black beans. We make a big pot of black beans. We have rice. And then we spend a lot of time on all of the fun. We make fresh salsas and guac and tons of... So there's plenty, there's like a Mexican salad. There's a big corn salsa. So really, people can find the things that they can eat.
Right. They can layer.
They can find something in there.
They can layer all the ingredients they like. And can tolerate. And kids, too, might like that choice so that they can...
Totally. They do.
To be allergic to the black beans.
Yes,
and they're really not.
They just go for what they want. We did have one time when I said that about we don't usually ask people's allergies. We did a business dinner sometime but it was a bunch of people who were from out of town and international consultants, and it was a bizarro, but the mix of dietary issues was so epic that I was like, I don't think we can, I don't know that there's a food that we can I don't think there is a food that can be rice. Because we had a man who tried to eat kosher who was with us. We had a Hindu man, a vegan, like people with dairy intolerances, vegetarians. Like I was like, when you put all these filters on possible meals to serve, the answer is no. There's nothing. No, we didn't do the Mexican, but we did something that was similar to that, which is we just did a salad. We did like a big salad bar because I did like marinated garbanzo beans and Luke grilled steak, but we're like, it's separate so the Hindu man does not need to participate in that.
In the meat.
And then all of the gluten-free people don't have to eat a roll, but there was an Italian man there who ate like 7 of them. So I was like, we just kind of were like, this is going to be, we're putting everything on, we're putting every food we can think of on this table, and we'd like you to pick things. And
make enough for everyone, and if someone decides to forego the roll, the Italian will make sure to...
he'll cover I think he even took some home. But the goal with that, what I meant is, it's a great way to accommodate a lot of different, just having things separated enough that it's easy for people to do what they want, skip dairy or skip,
Do you make your black beans from scratch? Meaning
I do.
The bag of beans instead of the can?
I do. Not that I'm offended by a can of black beans, but I like them a lot better when they are made from... And black beans are little, so they don't take that long. It really is like in an afternoon you can...
Do you do it on the stove or an Instapot, or what's your favorite technique?
So because there's a lot of people, an Instant Pot would not...
It's true, it wouldn't hold enough.
Wouldn't make enough. So I use a big pot, and we don't really follow a recipe. We put however many, probably 5 pounds or something of black beans in the pot, rinse them, pick out the nasty ones, and then just a lot of water. We usually put like a can of tomato paste and some garlic cloves. I'll cut an onion in half and throw it in there because we'll pull it out at the end. And then like some oregano and cumin and coriander. We just put whatever, but we never measure it all, and we don't put salt in until the end so that they cook well and you can season them at the end.
Delicious.
And just simmer them while we try to get other things done. And they are good. They really are delicious.
And do you follow the time on the bag, or do you change it?
I actually... Well, this is the answer. I don't know what it says on the bag. So I might. I don't know. But I don't know what it says. We just have simmered them. Usually I feel like I get them up to a boil, and then you want to make sure they really are simmering, not just sitting at a warm temperature. And we stir them and top off the water here and there while we're in the kitchen for the day. Yeah.
Taste until they're tender.
Yeah, pretty much. That's how we would do it. So
okay, well, I need multiple recipes from you. It sounds
like
that's
an easy one.
Mexican enchiladas or some other Mexican dish. And the corn salsa sounded amazing, too.
Yeah. That one, am I skipping ahead? You don't want me to say a kitchen thing that I recommend you have.
Well, you can throw that in the middle of it.
Wait, I thought you told me you wanted to talk about that later, and I'm jumping the gun. It's just called a food chopper or whatever. And it does seem gimmicky. Like, I understand people not thinking I need this item. But if you are making food for big crowds, I actually think it is one of the things that I'm like real glad that I have that.
Because it's instant chopping.
It's like a knife grid that you can pound something through. But for the salsa, what I was saying is you can cut red onions, like dice them into pretty 1/4-inch dices very fast.
Which takes a long time on a cutting board.
Yeah, and if you need to do like 3 onions or something, you're like, so corn salsa, we do jalapenos, red peppers, red onion, and then just bags of frozen corn stirred into that, and then it's salt and lime juice and cilantro.
And does the frozen corn just come to room temp, sitting there while you're waiting to serve? You don't do anything like cook it ahead of time?
No, don't cook it. It's just thawed. It's just thawed from the bag. So we stir it in. I think sometimes we maybe have put tomatoes in that. I don't know, but I'm not usually, because we do a tomato. It's another sneaky system. Fresh. When you cook for crowds, you find the shortcuts. Mm-hmm, you find the ways that you're going to not have this take as long as it could take. And one of those is whenever we make a fresh salsa, I use grape tomatoes and slice them with a slicer attachment in a food processor, because you can go through clamshells of tomatoes very fast. Yes, so you can end up with all these sliced, and it's very pretty. Mm-hmm. And then you season that however you want to, but it is way faster than starting with several big bags of tomatoes.
Do you have a recipe, or do you just go by the when you look at it, you think, okay, this is about right on each amount?
Yeah, I don't have a recipe for that. That is something that we have just. We're messy cooks at our house. I'm not great at this, but we do.
Those are the best chefs.
Am I leaning too close to that? I realize that's where you're recording right there, and I'm leaning my face all the way up to
You're
it.
good.
We do. So sometimes in the food processor, I start with the cutting blade, and I would throw like garlic and some cilantro and maybe some salt in it and chop it up, and then switch to the slicer and slice tomatoes into that. And then dump. So that's like the beginning of what we're going to add to that. But sometimes we might do onion instead of garlic, or, we do whatever is.
Whatever you have, whatever sounds good. So to recap, corn salsa could be salt and pepper, cilantro, corn, red onion, jalapeno,
red pepper, and lime juice.
Did I mention tomatoes? I may have mentioned tomatoes.
No, I don't think you did say tomatoes, but we have put them in it before, and it's delicious. It's just I prefer to have a tomato salsa and then the corn salsa.
Those are separate.
Yeah, because you can easily mix it on your plate.
And the tomato salsa, you slice the tomatoes and salt and pepper. What was the other thing? Or was that it?
There are no garlic and cilantro, but sometimes I think whatever you would want in a fresh salsa. So if you're wanting to do jalapenos and onions, but it's good with just the somebody told me this tip. So I think it was one of our podcast listeners who told me the tip of using the food processor, and I will say that we never went back on that. Like once I did that, I was like, that's how we do this. This is the way that we do this.
Right. This is how we're doing it from here on
totally. Out. But I think and I have done this, is toast some cumin seeds in a saucepan or whatever, and then throw it in. It's good. It adds an interesting.
Where do you buy cumin seeds? I have
anywhere you buy your spices.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Whole cumin, whatever.
Okay.
Anyways, that is, so we really we do however the spirit leads us on the toppings. But we usually buy some of the little, in the Mexican food section, we buy cans of different little hot salsas or things, because we make big bowls of like a cabbage slot. So we'll do angel hair cabbage with cilantro, salt, and lime juice, and then corn salsa, and then tomato and guac. But then we buy a lot of we use crema or cotija cheese, and we'll make a queso sauce usually too. That brings in, there's a certain guest that the queso sauce brings them in, like that. Right. That's what they wanted. Right. So
my daughter loves queso. She would just be at the queso station.
Yeah. So it is but that's what I mean is that you wouldn't, everything that's on the buffet, I would probably not expect everyone to put on their plate. So sometimes we might do pickled red onions, or, you just add whatever, and it's colorful and wild and
very fun,
easy.
Because who at home every weeknight is bringing out all those different components? During the weeknight, you're not usually doing that.
That's one of the things that's fun about it, because it's actually an easy way to feed a huge crowd of people, but it is not what you're going to do in your own home for 6 people or something. It's too much.
Typically serve tortilla chips and tortillas.
Tortilla chips, yes. We put them on the buffet. Usually it would maybe be, rice, beans, tortilla chips, and then all of the salsas and slaws and things. But I also, the enchiladas is like, it's such a big cheating
system. If you have enchiladas, I was thinking of the meat separate, but if you have enchiladas,
we don't do tortillas, but we do chips
and everything all in there.
But we do on the enchiladas. That is like a way that I feel like this menu comes up when we have a protein of some kind that we just, so Winco, our local grocery store, in November, you get a free turkey when you spend $100 or something.
Nice.
Well, I just spend $100 every weekday
week
easily.
Not multiple times a week.
No, I mean, every time I walk into Winco for something, I spend $100. So you can just end up with a lot of turkeys. So a lot of the time I would throw a whole turkey in a big pot and simmer, make stock and shred all the meat and pack it in stock, and then we would use that in enchiladas. So if I end up with things like I have a ton of
a time saver, pre-cooked meat is amazing.
Yeah. And if you do that, if you have yourself a lot of turkey ready to go, the enchilada is the perfect, it thins it out so it will feed a lot more people. It just is. I think the last time we did this, I had ground bison in my freezer that I was trying to get rid of. And I was like, well, we made it bison enchiladas and chicken. I think we had chicken and bison.
I have never cooked bison. Where did you find bison?
I also am not usually involved. What I'm saying is we got rid of the bison into enchiladas, and it was good. It was fun. It's easy. But when I say enchiladas, I am being fast and loose with the genre, because we do it like a lasagna. Layer the tortillas,
so rolling each
one.
And
I'm not frying a tortilla. Mm-hmm. No way, because this is not what we're about. In this this is not.
I think I've just rolled mine. Just filled it and rolled it and put it in the pan, and then a sauce on top. I don't think I've fried it, but
if you do corn tortillas, if you're doing a corn tortilla, you usually have to fry them to make them soft enough to roll.
Oh, that's
true. And I'll buy the half corn, half the golden blend. It's corn and flour blend, and I like it because it has the flavor of corn. But
how is it labeled? I usually see yellow corn tortillas and white corn tortillas. How is this?
This
labeled?
is golden blend. It's corn and flour blend.
And this is at regular grocery stores?
Yeah, well, I buy it at my regular grocery stores.
I'll have to look. I don't think I've ever bought that. I would say I've never seen that, but that's probably, how when you go grocery shopping, you just zone into what,
totally.
You're kind of picking
I
the
feel
thing
like
you
it's
recognize.
I feel like it's a relatively newer thing to have those all, because for a long time it was flour or corn was your only
and they
options,
roll a lot
at least in our grocery stores. Yeah, they don't tear like a corn one does. I use those, so usually I use those. But I do otherwise. I don't have a recipe for enchiladas either. I mean, this is because you might put bison in them. I mean, you can't trust yourself.
Listeners, I will try to type something up.
But if I had chicken or whatever, I use the Old El Paso enchilada sauce. I like that one a lot better than.
And that's in a jar.
La Victoria or whatever.
Yes.
It's in cans.
Or cans.
In big cans. And I do what I think I got from a Pioneer Woman enchilada thing, which is making a little roux, like a little bit of oil, a little bit of flour, and then pepper and cumin, and then it's half the enchilada sauce and half like chicken broth.
Really?
And then cilantro. So sometimes I'll throw cilantro stems chopped finely in it, or just a few leaves. But it makes the sauces, I think it makes it way better doing that. So for whatever reason, we do that method. And if I'm doing ground beef, I think this is also from a Pioneer Woman thing. It's tons of chopped black olives with the beef and green chilies. It's very good.
Well, that sounds delicious.
Yeah, but it whatever. When we do enchiladas, we just go totally rogue and make as many pans of whatever varieties of things we have. And then that's what we...
So serving a big crowd, what kind of pans do you use? How do you purchase prep items for a big crowd?
Usually I use the hotel foil pans at our house. I do that because I order the big box full of those. But that particular pan, those are the really big long ones. I don't actually know what the dimensions are.
What are they called?
It's probably like
it's
probably, but it's the steamer pan or whatever it is. It's that hotel pan. But those fit like the way that I know I can fit them in my oven is why I use those so often, because you can maximize everything. But before I have a bigger oven now. So before I had the bigger oven, I used Wilton cake pans all the time.
Wilton cake pans.
Yeah, they're just like aluminum pans, but they're rectangles, and these are things that you didn't know you would ever care about, because in my imaginary world, what I love is a beautiful ceramic baking dish with the pretty handles.
Right.
That's not what I love when you're trying to fit a lot in your oven.
No.
And you're like we are wasting space, people. Yeah, like we are like, do you see this oval that, whatever. So the cake pans, like for, if you went to Michael's or Joann's or even at Walmart, they'll have a cake baking, like wedding cakes or whatever section. Those pans are so fuss free. They're just a big rectangle, and they come in different sizes because of the people making different sizes of cakes, presumably. So there are big ones that are probably, 15 by 7. I have a number of those that I would use because you can fit them side by side on the rack. Like figuring out what will fit in your oven, where you're like, I could get 4 pans in this at one time, then that's why I use those. So I have those all. I have a lot of those. Very unattractive pans.
But, hey, works for a large crowd.
Yeah, I would like someone to make a line of cute pans that are this functional, but they don't do it, do they?
If you are creative, this could be a multi-million-dollar business.
I feel like the classic enamel baking dish should be more represented in this world.
Yes.
But you know what I'm talking about? The little extendo handle that makes you not able to shut the oven door if the pan is turned that direction. It's just really obnoxious.
Work. Yeah. And then you have to turn it sideways, so then you can't put 2
and then it's over. It's all over. You can't do it. Yeah.
Okay, I did look it up. I order from samsclub.com. I'm sure Costco, Walmart, wherever you want to order. But the one I've ordered before, it's called half size aluminum steam table pans, half size. They do carry full size. And,
the foil.
The other thing, they have lids. I'm sure you know this, but I discovered this. I mean, I know that, but I had to host a rehearsal dinner this past June, and I had a friend helping me, and they said, be sure and order lids. I was like, order lids? What? And genius.
Yeah, because
instead of putting foil on top.
And if the lids are firm enough, you can stack them in a fridge or stack them.
They close really well. And the other thing that we ordered, it was so cheap, was the, what was it called? It was the metal, let me look at, I'm seeing a set here, but it was the chafing dish wire rack. And you could put tea lights underneath.
Oh, yeah.
So I went to a rental place, and I guess it was probably the nicer chafing dishes. But to rent the amount I needed was rather expensive. Mm-hmm. And so I just ordered these wire racks because we were going to be using the aluminum table pans anyway.
Yeah.
So it was kind of fancy, but a little casual. We were doing a big barbecue. And so we ordered these chafing wire racks and put tea lights under them. And so that's a way you could do a buffet outside or inside and keep your food hot if you needed it.
I have this is not for everyone because I do this often enough. It's worth the investment, but this is not a cheap option.
Right.
But whatever. Is that we have a hot box, which I bought a hot box. So you can use a cooler as just like a heat insulator also, right? So you can put hot things in a cooler and keep the lid closed and it will stay hot for a long time. But a hot box is a catering thing, but it will fit. Ours, it has a door on the front instead of the top. So ours will fit 6 of the big half-size foil pans stacked in it and just keep them hot for a long time. So if you have the lids in the pans and you slide them all in there.
But if you have a hot box, then that's even better. And
you do have to. I realize this is not the tip for everyone, but it was a real tip for me.
Well,
it was
for sure. If you're hosting a large crowd every week, it's worth investing in.
The one where I bought the hot box, and then we had a Thanksgiving sometime not that long after we have it, and that was what really. We were like, this is the dream, because it was
confirmation that our purchase was.
Oh, it was so much
investment.
Yes, because a ton of people, Thanksgiving is way more. There's way more variety show going on in a Thanksgiving. Like you have way more things that have to get into the oven and get into the whatever. And I got up. I remember Thanksgiving morning. I got up really early, and obviously because it was Thanksgiving, and got I think we baked rolls or whatever, but put the potatoes, which we had mashed, and had them in pans in the fridge. So it was like make-ahead potatoes. But I baked them at 5 a.m, like got them all up to temperature and put them in the hot box. And then when the hams were done, Luke carved them and we put them in the hot box. And then we had like green beans. And it ended up being that when everybody came to our house, there was nothing actually, like it was so much more like... We just have to pull stuff out and put it in a serving dish, and then it will be ready.
That's amazing.
And I was like, the hot box. Oh, I think the stuffing was in there. We had like green beans, stuffing, mashed potatoes, ham. It was so much stuff all in there ready to roll.
And you can't fit all of that in one oven to stay hot all at once.
No, because you know how it's always a big strategy. But there's always a lot of strategy involved in Thanksgiving and what's going to go in there.
I'm going to have to look into this hot box. Because last
it's a game changer.
I kept rotating. Like, okay, I think the potatoes are getting cold. Put those back in. Pull out the ham.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Where did you buy your hot box?
I think I got it at a restaurant supply store. So.
And I did misspeak earlier. I said tea lights. I did not mean tea lights. Underneath those chafing dishes, you do have to use, something like Sterno. It's called Safe Heat Chafing Fuel.
I think sometimes they do tea lights.
There are tea
under
lights
them, but I think the Sterno is a better choice.
It is a better choice. And the way we did it, and I don't know, maybe this is just standard, but we bought the full-size pans, and that fit into the racks, and you put a little water in the bottom, and then you put 2 half pans next to each other. And so they were raised just a little bit above the water, but the water kept them from
it's like a double boiler kind of system.
Kept the bottoms from burning. And we did stir it some, but it really worked out perfect. So
that's great.
Very inexpensive. If you can also invest. I mean, you could buy the real fancy chafing dishes if you did that often.
If you wanted to store those, think of it.
If you had a place.
If you were that person who had a place
But otherwise,
I make room for a hot box, but apparently not for the hot box is funny. It doesn't really have a home. It's always like it's under the desk in the kitchen, and it doesn't matter. We put up with it. It's not even cute, and we put up with that thing.
Well, I I think I would put up with it in my life. Just if only for more sanity during Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, where do you go to find cooking inspiration? So you're thinking it's not 2:00. Let's say it's 10:00, and you're all staring at each other. We don't know what to make. Nothing sounds good. Do you have a favorite blog or a favorite cookbook, or where do you find inspiration?
I don't. We have a lot of cookbooks at our house, and what's funny is that as I've gotten older and life has just gotten busier, I spend a lot less time looking at cookbooks. However, I have children that look at the cookbooks.
They're your inspiration.
They're like, Mom, this is what we should do. But most of the time I feel like it is, I feel like I've been doing this long enough that we're mostly thinking in genres of, like, we don't do the same thing over and over, but you think like, oh, like I think today I'm making a Moroccan chicken and couscous for dinner.
Delicious.
Yeah.
Did they have inspiration out of a Moroccan cookbook?
No, whatever has happened, I feel like sometimes you make different varieties of things, or like it might start, I should say, if you're on a budget, the things that you should get good at making, like polenta, couscous, like some of those starches, like rice is obviously pretty cheap, but polenta and couscous are both like, it's probably like 35 cents to feed 60 people polenta. It is, and it's very filling. Like, it's funny how much that is it is sort of an elegant, like if you make a beautiful stew of some kind and you're serving it with polenta, it doesn't come off like you're doing the cheapest thing you could think of to do.
Right.
But it is very cheap.
And you actually, don't you serve the stew over the polenta?
Yeah.
How do you season your polenta?
You cook it it probably cooks for just in the water or chicken broth and with some salt until probably for 45 minutes or something. You just whisk it periodically. Usually at the end we would stir in some handfuls of Parmesan and butter or something, but you don't even have to do that. You just have treated everyone to your big 50-cent outlay.
That sounds delicious.
It is so cheap, though. It is, and it is delicious. It's good.
It kind of sounds like grits from the South.
Well, it's
similar?
They're kind of interchangeable. I think there are technical
more than polenta. I'm not sure if I have cooked polenta.
Well, but they're pretty interchangeable. If you're buying them dry here, I'm pretty sure that it's labeled. Sometimes it's labeled polenta when they use them in it pretty interchangeably.
Maybe they're cousins.
Yeah,
I have to research that.
Oh, they're more than cousins. I think they're probably twins. Yeah, different preparations. But anyways, couscous is another one that is just different. Like, I bet most of your guests are not regularly making themselves couscous, but they might. I don't know, but people like it, so it's like it's a fun something different.
So you think of a genre, and
then we go from there. So sometimes if I see something that I think, oh, that's beautiful, or one of my kids shows me something and they're like, we should make this sometime. Sometimes something just gets in the back of your mind. Like, we're almost to fall, so it's almost fallish, almost ready to transition into this. And I just remembered today, I was like, oh, do you remember when we did that roasted cauliflower as a side dish? And I'm like, I know that we'll bring that around again. But that was fun, and I'm not even sure where you know what I mean? Like, you probably saw a picture of it somewhere, and then I Googled, like, how do you do this? But it's the whole heads of cauliflower.
Really? You don't do the florets first?
No, we boil the whole heads in salted water until they're just barely tender, tender. And then we pull them all out, and you brush them with an herb butter or whatever and roast them that way. And I love it. In fall, I think it's so pretty because you can have a huge platter of all these whole heads of cauliflower with I stick our steak knives in them.
Are magical.
I know.
Delicious.
Yeah,
it
totally
transforms anything.
Yeah.
I was telling my twin sister, went to the farmer's market this morning, and I told her you have to buy zucchini and squash and roast them because it's like candy.
Yeah.
So
it's
good. Dessert.
Yeah. I do love them. One problem, tray. This is a problem with roasted veggies for a big crowd, and that is that you can't crowd the veggies on a tray that you're roasting.
That is true, because then it starts to steam instead of roast. You can't.
Yep.
You have to have
some
space.
I did use it for, this is another application of the hot box, because I did make roasted veggies recently, but it was just tray after tray of things that I roasted separately and then piled them all in together in the hot box into something because you can't fit that much.
Hot box may be on my Christmas
I know,
wish
it
list.
might be. You might be like, what I'd really like is
husband's gonna be like,
storage
"What is
container
this?"
for foil pans. This is my dream.
What is a hot box and why is it
And
on
why? What are you
your
doing?
list?
Yeah, but I love it. I have no regrets.
Okay, shopping tip. You shop at Winco starting at
In the mid-afternoon, yeah.
mid-afternoon.
No, not always.
how do you shop for a crowd?
I don't feel like this is a great tip for people because I am the opposite of the person who knows exactly how much of which thing we need to get. So we shop by like, does this look like enough chicken for this many people? One thing I have found through over time is that when you're cooking for a big crowd, you do not just multiply a recipe.
Okay.
It's because it gets weird a lot of the time.
I've heard that, especially with baking.
Oh yeah, baking probably for different reasons, but say you're following a recipe that's like put a quarter cup of olive oil in the bottom of a pan and saute the onions. Well, say you're times 10-ing the recipe or times 8. You're making an olive oil stew at the bottom of a pan.
I learned that the hard way, and hopefully Becca has forgiven me. Maybe she doesn't remember this, and maybe I shouldn't bring this up. But one time, we had a dinner at her house with all of her family and all of my family, and I told her, you set the table, you do all that work, and let me bring the whatever, soup, stew, whatever it was. It was a Pioneer Woman recipe, and it was delicious. It was some kind of meatball soup. But it was what you said. I made maybe 4 recipes, and she started with some olive oil, and she's like, add extra because it'll make, the flavor come out. And so I did it times 4.
Yeah, and then you really were out of control oily.
Yes, I put the pot on the stove. It started to cool just a bit. It's still hot, we put it on the table at their house to serve. And I'm like, wow, there's a lot of oil on the top. This is not good. Wow.
You're like, wow, I didn't see that coming.
Half a cup of olive oil in this soup. Dig in, guys.
Yeah. Well, I think that is it happens a lot because you're not doing things because they didn't design the recipe to make that many servings. So because of that, I don't ever, you're like eyeballing, like say today I'm going to make the Moroccan chicken, and I don't even remember what all is in it. There's green olives and carrots and it's like it is lemony, it's good. And but we'll just buy what seems like a reasonable amount, and I just put in what looks reasonable. And a lot of the time when you are multiplying, you don't even multiply like the surrounding ingredients in a stew or whatever. It's just going to be different when it's for a huge crowd versus when it is for a people of 6 or whatever. So when we shop, we're really just looking at it like, does that look like enough of this for this many people?
Intuition, because I think it is like you're saying, if you are looking at it and thinking, what, I'm going to have to dump in a cup of olive oil? That doesn't make sense. You really can have creative license to just put a few tablespoons.
And you have to actually taste what you're doing and then make decisions. Like sometime a while ago, I made a stew. It was a beef stew, but it was not with the recipe. It was just like, I don't know, I think we just seared beef and then red wine and had shallots or whatever we had going. It was just a basic. But when I tasted the sauce, it was like, it was just too savory. Like it was just too, and I'm like, I think it should, like it was delicious, but it just wasn't there yet. You're like, this should have some other thing going on. And I, as it ended up, I think we had mushrooms. That's an off topic, but there were mushrooms in it. And I tasted it, but I remember thinking, I wonder if molasses would be good in this, but I really don't know that it would be. So you put like a little bit of molasses in a spoon and taste it with the sauce. And I'm like, no, actually, that's actually really what would help this. So then, but it's not, it's like I was standing there like, something.
What do I put in here?
Yeah, like
so
something.
Interesting to arrive
something
at
needs to be. Well, it's just because it was plenty savory. It was a lot of umami and a lot of salt and savory, but it just needed something to. Yeah, and it ended up. It was great, but That's a tip. Do you care about me going rogue and giving you another tip?
Rogue. Please give us another tip.
Because I do buy food bulk. There are things that I do because I know I'll be feeding crowds that you prepare in advance, not for a particular menu or a particular item. But one of those is I will sometimes just buy a big flat of mushrooms.
Now, do you buy bulk from U.S. Foods?
I buy bulk from everywhere I go.
Okay.
I do get some from U.S. Foods, but I also, like, if I go to Winco and there's a good price on apples or whatever, I'll ask them to get me a 40-pound box of it.
Do they lower the price at grocery stores for bulk, or do
sometimes
they
do, but it's just easier to have them bring you a 40-pound box of apples than to buy that many bags.
Bagging it up.
Yeah.
So do they go to the back and get it for you? Or do you have to call ahead?
Meet them at the back door of the back by the deli.
Good to
put
know.
it out.
So do you go to that department and ask?
Just grab a person who's working in the produce department and ask them to give me a box. That's what I usually do. But the mushrooms, I will chop them in the food processor, and then with shallots and some fresh thyme, so they're totally chopped in the food processor. You just cook them. You reduce it on the stove, some salt, maybe, but not. I don't usually put very much salt in. Pepper, fresh thyme, and shallots. And it cooks into like a paste. I mean, it's like a thick, it's still individual pieces, but little flecks of mushrooms. And then I freeze it in like with a cookie dough baller. Freeze them so that later, some other future day, you're like, mushrooms would be good in this, but I didn't buy, it is just, it's like an essence of mushrooms, and they're really delicious. So you can pull off things like, if I had roast, you're like, I could make a stroganoff really quickly because I have mushrooms.
It's a very hot tip.
These are random things to do.
Rogue with your tips.
Yeah. Well, but these are the things that you feel empowered. You're like, having a bag full of mushroom power balls makes you really, that's what was in that stew. That's what reminded me of it. So it's like, it was like, it just had a lot of umami and flavor, but it needed something else.
That sounds amazing. Great tip. And speaking of Powerballs, I have a rogue tip.
Oh, good. I like rogue tips.
My sister has a recipe called Powerballs. I think that's what she called it, or energy bites. Anyway, but those, it's totally different. It's not mushroom. It's for kids, teenagers.
Dates and coconut and
all
stuff?
All those things. You can do oats and mini chocolate chips or dried cherries or almond butter or peanut butter, or you can do maybe protein powder or dried milk, just different things. She does have a particular recipe, but what's so fun, I feel very empowered if I have a bag of those frozen in the freezer for when the kids come in just dying.
Me, ready, prepared,
and they'll eat them frozen, but it's good thrown in a lunch for
that's
after
great.
School snack, and
that's great.
Powerballs. Okay, cleaning. So obviously, if you're hosting a crowd, you don't have the fairies overnight who come. You sleep and
fall
asleep.
What a shame!
Elves or fairies overnight transform the kitchen.
Yeah.
What's your best cleaning tip?
Are we talking about before or after?
Well, either, I guess, because both are very applicable when you're inviting, and then when you're saying goodbye,
feel like we
and
end
turn around and see the kitchen.
Because we host Saturday night, we typically do not clean up. And when we do, we do what we can do Saturday night. So
your guests
we have 2 dishwashers, and I like to have both of them going. Like, I know that we've started something, and if I am still have enough energy and I'm still in the mood to be doing stuff, then ideally that the dishwashers are both going and things are getting more stacked. You know what I mean? Like orderly mess that needs to be cleaned up.
The next load's ready.
Right. But we pretty much never have everything all the way cleaned up Saturday night. But part of that is that our Sabbath dinner... Yeah,
and try to make it to church.
Right, and our point in Sabbath dinner is the kickoff for the Lord's Day. And often usually we have other funny stuff going on because my daughters help coordinate the cookies for after church. So a lot of the time they're baking cookies on top of whatever's happening. And I do communion bread usually every other week. I make some of the communion bread. So a lot of the time it's really funny because when Sabbath is over, people are slicing communion bread and making cookies, and it's on top of a horrible mess. So that's my tip. That's my cleaning tip. Right. Yeah, like, wow, make it easy on yourself.
Well, but just feeling okay to leave it overnight and stack it over to the
Yes.
side.
Well, we
and
do
keep
it.
going
We do not do the dishes on Sunday until
Your
6
Sabbath
o'clock. So
celebration.
we just, and the funny part is that's fun and it works and we love it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is basically the goal that we have with Sabbath is to kick off the Lord's Day. And we don't want to do that by getting yourself into a frenzy about whatever.
Right.
The funny side effect for us has been that by Sunday night at 6, I think everyone is so ready to hit it and make it. Like
we want to get the kitchen back in
what
order.
sounds awesome? It sounds awesome to clean this up.
Right.
You know, and then we're really ready.
We're really
and it's
ready
been
to do
an
it.
interesting, like, we love not doing it in the day, but then we love doing it. And I think that's been a real learning experience for me, because I would have thought the only way to feel restful would be to have everything be
Everything's
done.
pristine. Now I can sit and lay and look at my perfect house and have my candle burning.
Yeah, and it will be nice and it'll just be relieving in the way that you would think it would be relieving. What's interesting to me about this is that we're all relaxed and ready for our work. Like Monday, since doing this way, Monday is like my favorite day. I love Monday. Mm-hmm. And I didn't ever feel that way. When you're like, Monday is often not people's favorite days.
No.
Yeah. But somehow that total day of rest, and then it's like, it is fun to get back into like,
Actually,
okay.
Monday, if you do take a true day of rest, Monday is actually a great day.
It is.
If
You're
you
like,
don't, it's a pretty rough day.
well, that's what I think it would be true if I was feeling like I have to get this all totally cleaned up. I have to get
then
whatever.
You're not having your rest.
Yeah, and then you're not actually, you feel way more like I'm being beat down by all this work, but it's not, it's, it took some practice. I'm not saying that was intuitive for us. And when I say practice, what I probably mean is my husband saying, no, we're not doing this right now.
You've been working all day to prep this meal.
We're not
You're
doing
gonna
this.
rest.
Like, this is actually a full stop. So
Right.
I do as much as I can do, and then we don't worry about it.
Yeah, very good. What is your best advice for showing warm hospitality to those coming into your home?
Oh man, this kind of falls into the same thing as when I said it's different moods, doing, like, it's not always the same. It's who is coming into your house. And sometimes, so like when we would host PDGs or have big crowds of people on a weeknight.
And PDG is Parish Discipleship.
Oh, right. So when we'd host a lot of people for like a weeknight thing, I found that I think it's far more hospitable to give them something to do and help when they come. So like way more like, yes, would you cut the lettuce for this and join, like I just invite them. But the tone of that event is different in that it is not, it's like, it's more community.
Like an icebreaker.
Yeah, I guess I've just found that I need to chill out a little bit about, not like everything doesn't have to be ready when people get there. It's okay to have, whatever. And because that's a event that there's lots of kids coming to that event, we always would put paper on the kids' table and crayons and scatter candy down the table. Fall pumpkins.
Hold that thought. Don't deviate from that. But I remembered one time too, you had a tip about Moses helping in the kitchen. He's your youngest. Didn't he have some kind of special knife that he got to use to help?
Oh yeah,
the lettuce?
We have a lettuce knife. Yeah, like a plastic knife.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and that is the thing I tell people, when your kids are little and they're not helpful, still give them things to do that make them feel like they're part of the team and they're doing stuff. I've had a lot of incompetent toddlers peel potatoes or carrots that we were not going to eat in the dinner. Like, I'm like, peel this for me, would you? I mean, they can peel a carrot for a long time. Yeah, like, I mean, because they peel the whole carrot, the whole thing. Till there's
once the peel is off, they can just keep going.
I think our daughter Blair used to always, whenever we would cook something with broccoli or whatever, the stems, she would dice them up with a not a sharp knife. Like, it was a lot of work to cut those things into little chunks. She really had a phase. It was really funny, but she would present this, like, I think she brought like a goblet full of broccoli stem chunks out to the table to offer around the table to everyone. Cute. You know what? It just doesn't matter. I'm like, that's absolutely, this is absolutely what we meant to serve. This is it.
Great.
But yes, I do try to get the kids involved in stuff. But
so back to PDG, they come,
right. So I know that the
with
kids, it's like you're welcome.
Paper.
Yes, and it
Craft
clearly
paper, where do you buy craft paper to cover a table.
Yeah, I would do freezer paper works really well because it's white and the wax on one side. So if you just flip it over, you can get a big roll of that pretty much anywhere. But
Sure.
I have right now, I don't know where I got. I think at a surplus sale or somewhere I got a huge roll of brown craft paper. But we do that. I will put, I think in the fall, very festive on kids' tables are fall and winter, the chocolate coins. Because they actually look pretty with the candles and it's little gold or silver.
And most of the time those are only in kids' stockings. Or they come out at Christmas time in the aisle where you can buy all the different Christmas
Maybe.
candies.
I feel like they might be year round, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't buy them until I feel like gold metallic is what I'm looking for.
Maybe they are year round. Like it may be that same type of thing where you're scanning the aisle and you don't see that item that's always there.
I think they're under the jelly beans. I think they're at Winco in the bulk. But either way, we get those. So scatter that kind of thing or the little pumpkins or something.
So fun.
And I know that makes
for kids.
If you're having people with kids, thinking of their children is a great way to make them feel welcome because it is not fun to pull into it. Like if you have little kids and you go to someone's house and it looks like a place where your children will only damage things or not be, that is stressful. So
right. Or if
I have a big bin of Duplos.
Something off the table, they've broken grandma's china.
You're like, oh no. Yeah, I have a big bin of Duplos. So if we're having people with kids, a lot of times we'll pull it out, put it clearly you're clearly invited to play with this. This is fine and expected.
Yes.
So that's a good way to do it. I don't know, with adults, we usually try to have them. It depends. I mean, it seems like every time is different. But I like having guests usually with family because even though I am busy when they arrive, there are other adults who sort of can host and welcome and talk to people. But that's hard if it's just you.
That's true.
You have to be different kind of. If you're like, I'm the only one, then it's probably better to have them have something that they can help you with in the kitchen.
That's true, so that they can be visiting with you, but you're also getting their final last-minute tasks
accomplished. You're getting your stuff done. Yeah.
Very good. What is your must-have kitchen item, and where can we find it? You did mention
the food
one
chopper.
already. The food chopper. Tell us, do you have a particular brand, and where did you buy it?
I think it's called Food Star, and it's on Amazon.
Okay.
And it is funny because that is a tool that we only use for very specific. It's not like I use it every day, or it's not like, but when it's the right thing to use, you are so glad that you have it.
Yes. Because
when you need to make a huge, it's not called Food Star. Hold on.
Okay, let me see.
Well, or if it is.
Hold on, I see a bestseller
just
here.
like Full Star. FULL Star. Full Star Vegetable Chopper.
Okay, Full Star.
And that item just totally helps us get through.
Okay, I see it here. And are there different sizes, or all basically the same
Not
size?
that I know of. And actually, looking at it, I don't know what these... I don't think I ever... Either I never got some of these attachments, a spiral blade and a ribbon blade. No idea. I've never used those.
So you mostly use the square.
I just use these two things. These two grids.
The two grids.
The quarter-inch grid and the bigger... and I use the bigger one when I'm chopping. Like if I am, roasting squash, do butternut squash. Mm-hmm. Just slice it. And
butternut squash can be really hard. So it can handle really hard vegetables as well.
Yeah, that's how I cut my butternut squash.
I do
it is
that because
you probably will cut your finger on it sometime because
you'll am going to order this today because in the fall I love. Ina Garten has two roasted squash recipes. Speaking of magical roasting of vegetables, she has one that's without any kind of sweetener. It's a roasted butternut squash, maybe salt and pepper, that kind of taste. But there's another one that I think it has maple syrup, or maybe it's a brown sugar and butter. Oh, again, it's like candy. I could just, I justify eating large amounts because I'm eating my vegetables.
Oh, it's so good. I eat
desserts.
I eat a lot of squash in the
But I
fall.
do not love trying to chop butternut squash into those tiny little cubes. So it's
not a delight. Yeah,
it's not a delight.
It's much easier to do it with this kind of thing. One thing that I do, because I do make a butternut squash soup in the fall. And this is another bulk prep hot tip.
Okay.
Bulk prep.
I love it.
You can
She's
roast.
going rogue again.
I'm going rogue. Off topic.
Yay.
You can roast butternut squash whole. So like
That's true.
without
cutting it in half.
Yeah, you just
Okay.
do it afterwards. And I have done that where I'll do a full sheet pan of it, roast it all, and then you slice it, scoop out the seeds, and then you just have all the pulpy flesh. And I will freeze it in gallon bags so that if you want to make a quick like soup, when you get I do onion and chicken broth or whatever, and then throw all the squash in it and then immersion blend it so it makes a really thick.
I need to buy an immersion blender too.
Yeah,
That's
probably
a hot
do.
tip. I don't have one, and I keep thinking occasionally I really need one of those. And I have never done a whole butternut squash. I mean, that is another time that I have almost chopped fingers off, is trying to keep it from rolling. And then I do have cut it in half and roasted it, and then scooped everything out and chopped, gotten the small pieces. But cooking it whole would be better, because then later it's easier to cut in half.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's super. By the time it's ready, it's so soft, you just can scoop out all of the flesh.
Does it take a long time to cook whole?
It is a while. I don't remember the details. I feel like I Google that whenever I need to do it. But I do that, and then when I make that thick squash and
Yeah.
I make that thick squash broth, I guess, and then I do wild rice, sausage, corn, and then you add cream on it. I can't remember if I put peppers in it. I might.
It sounds like you have all of these memorized, and I need to get better at that.
Well, the problem is I don't
kind of
write
in
them
your
down.
head,
So the problem
knowing
is you're like,
how to
how did we
create
do
a
that?
soup
I
for
liked
it.
that. So I do that.
I need
Some of
to
them are
I need
like
to get
that.
better at that, of just having kind of in my head something that I know all the ingredients for, and not I have to have a
Right.
recipe and it has half cup here and one
Yeah,
cup here.
and I have to do this. Years ago, I remember trying to get there, like where I was like, I want to just be able to cook a piece of, like if someone's like, here's this piece of meat, I want to just know what I should do with that, and not feel like, oh no, I have to find a recipe that calls for this specific thing, but I think you have to get, cooking is not as exact as everyone wants to make it, because I always think of our great grandmothers and their wood-fired stoves and just making things happen. No, and I'm pretty sure they were good.
They were very good.
I'm pretty sure they made good food.
Well, and they had to figure out ways to make it different.
Yeah.
Instead of making the same Johnny cake over and over
Yeah,
and over,
like,
then they
do
might
something
add
else.
a different little ingredient, or
Totally.
instead of frying it on
But
a
it
pan,
is
they're doing
true
something else.
that you can't.
Different technique.
Yeah, you have to be okay with the fact that you might make something magnificent one time that you can't reproduce exactly the next time. Like that it was. But I like living on the edge of that.
Okay, well, you're inspiring me, because I am more of the person, I think that I've mentioned this before, I'm more of the person who feels like they have to follow the recipe exact. But I have learned from many years of cooking that sometimes a recipe is a very good base, but if you follow it exact, it's actually not a great recipe. But you can make it a good recipe if you're an experienced cook. Like it may need more seasonings, it's a good start, but it's bland.
Yeah, but it's not all that.
It's not all that. You need to add seasonings, or like you said with molasses, just, this really needs molasses thrown in here. It's really good, but we need molasses now.
But I questioned my judgment about the molasses. I'm like, I had to taste it first, because it's not like I was just going to slug some molasses into a big thing.
Don't do your giant pot for 40.
Yeah.
Take out a bowl.
Don't be crazy, but a lot of the time with stews and things, you do need something like you might want to add vinegar at the end. You need to add something to contrast somehow. You're like, this is something. And whenever I'm having that question, I taste it, like taste a tiny bit of it, or smell a spice with it, or whatever. When I was, what you were saying about recipes, when I was, I guess I want to say I was college age. I'm not sure, but this is baking more than cooking. But I was like, I'm going to make a bagel. I think it was a Better Homes and Gardens bagel recipe, and I made it. But I'm pretty sure that I did the thing that is in every review of every recipe ever, which is like, this is a terrible recipe.
Right.
But I didn't do any of the things that it told me to do. I simply ignored what the recipe said, but I'm really offended by the outcome, and I made the bagels and they were just terrible. And I was like, that's a terrible recipe.
It's terrible recipe. Terrible. Even though I changed everything.
It's terrible.
It's the recipe's
well, I don't think
fault.
I don't think I was not such a confident baker that I would have meant to change everything, but I do, whatever. I did. And I just that was just hideous. That was a terrible recipe. And then later I was kind of, convicted is a strong word, except for I think it was convicted. That I was like, how do you know that you weren't the problem? Like, how can you know that this recipe really was bad?
When one finger's pointing at the recipe,
all the rest are pointing at me.
3 fingers are pointing back.
Exactly. So I went on a little binge of making that recipe. I made it every day for a little while. Why? I don't know. But
Your
the
kids
reality,
were very happy.
No, it was before I was married. So it was, but I made these bagels over and over and over. And it is, a bagel is an interesting recipe because it's an involved process. So because there's this recipe had you boil them and broil them and bake them. There's a lot of steps in making a bagel. And in that, there were a lot of places you could not do a good job. Mm-hmm. You could do every one of those steps. Yes,
down.
Like it might not have risen long enough. It might not. You can. And I think my first trip through, they were sort of like a rubber band.
Mm-hmm.
They were not delicious. And I made them every day until they actually were beautiful. Like they were beautiful and they were good. And at that time, I thought they were spectacular. By the end, I was like, this is everything I wanted a bagel to be. Fast forward many years, and I've done a lot more baking since then. And I went back and found that recipe and made them, and I was like, this is not a good bagel. The problem was on that last time through, the problem was actually that they're not that, they didn't have that much flavor. It was a hot bread, you made a bread that's fine, but it was not a magnificent bagel.
Not very flavorful.
But my point is, it was still much better than my first trip through. And I think a lot of the time you just have to be okay with all the time that it takes to actually learn how to do that.
Well, I have to give Rachel credit. I am not a bagel person. Some people love just going and buying bags of bagels and eating them randomly for various things. And that's just not me. I don't love bagels. So I thought, well, I'm just not a bagel person. They're dry. They're flavorless. And she had a recipe called Sunday morning bagels.
Oh, yeah.
That was probably
Did
after
you make
perfected.
those? Yeah. No, that's not the recipe I don't like. That's the recipe I do like.
That's your perfected recipe.
That's
or
a
at
good
least
recipe.
One
Yeah,
of
for
the
sure.
recipes that you perfected. And I did step by step. I tried to follow that one because I had no clue how to make bagels. And they were the most delicious things.
They're good.
And I decided, okay, I do like bagels.
Yeah. I was like, I like bagels, but I certainly don't like a bagel
Yeah.
I'm not always grabbing a grocery store bagel.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Okay, do you have a funny story about hospitality?
About hospitality.
Inviting someone
Funny
over,
stories.
something that pops into your mind?
Man, I feel like we've had probably plenty of funny stories, but if there's always something funny happening in the middle of
the chaos.
Yes, exactly. But I'm trying to think of if there's a funny story that you can share about.
You don't want to get too specific.
Is there a funny shareable story about this? I think one time I can remember. But when my mom used to host Sabbath, we would do. I have a restaurant-sized rice cooker also, so that's like a 60 cup. So if you're need to make a lot of rice. And that we were, I would bring parts of the meal to my mom's house. I would make dessert or I would make whatever. Mm-hmm. And there was one time that we were on our way out the door to go to Sabbath dinner. So this is mom hosting people and we're supposed to bring the restaurant rice cooker full of rice. When I realized, I never made rice. We're leaving. It's time for dinner. And rice is kind of, you rely on that
20 minutes. The restaurant may be longer.
Yeah. And you would rely on it filling people up. You can't, and it's not the thing to not show up with when you said you would. So it ended up, we were still late getting there, but we had to go we went and purchased a ton of rice from Panda Express.
They probably
Which
never
is like,
had that
did
order
you know,
before.
not an economical way to do it. Like when
Right.
you're like, well, we could bring, what would probably, it was just hilarious, but we had huge foil pans and we
Right.
had to go out and buy white rice because we did not remember
We
it.
need $60 of white
Yeah,
rice,
please give us as much white rice. But the merciful part there is that we thought of it.
Before
Like
you
it wasn't
showed up
like
with
we were
just
at the
about
buffet with no
rice.
rice. I don't think we probably did make dinner late. We were sort of like, oh shoot, what have we
Yes.
done?
When
Yeah,
you're doing
but-
a big crowd, it's pretty bad if you forget the rice. or
Yeah,
the
no.
potatoes
There's
or
some-
the noodles.
there's some key
or
things that
key
you wanna
things
know.
that you're hoping would fill
Yeah.
people up.
You rely on
Yeah,
those.
right.
Yeah. So we were real help for Mom that week.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for all of your tips, and especially the rogue ones. Those were the best.
Rogue tips are the best tips. Thanks for having me, Bess.
All right. Bye
All right.
for now.
Bye-bye.